we have had our fair share of active spells of weather here, especially if you've been here for any
I want you to listen to this,
part
please.
of your life. But this summer, certainly you can say now, without any strings attached, is one of the most active summers for weather in our area's history. And that is most remarkable because generally this summer is when those of us in this corner of the building, this meaning the Weather Center, are the quietest. And it has been everything but that so far this year. In fact, the number of tornado and severe storm warnings to date this year in Paducah is 528. It's the second most on record ever through this point in the year. You got to go back to 2006 to find more. And also the whiplash has just been mind-boggling. If you remember, and I know many of the farmers were saying this because you guys were messaging us saying, please guys, forecast rain. From the 21st of May through June the 10th, we had 0 rain, and that was the driest spell that ever was. Remember? I know it seems like forever ago. Since in Paducah, we've had over 17 inches of rain through today, which makes that spell the second wettest on record. So driest to one of the wettest ever. It's not often you have two extremes right back close to each other like that.
In the same year.
In the same year. This weather has been fueled by how warm it has been. The year as a whole is still sitting at the third warmest year on record. 61.5 degrees is the mean average temperature so far this year. All right, so now I get to be the bearer of good news for once, which I enjoy thoroughly, believe me, when I get to give you some good news here. You can say, c'est la vie to the heat and the humidity after tonight. It's going to feel amazing for the next couple of days. And this seems crazy for me to stand here and tell you, after tomorrow, it won't rain for a week. You have to go back to months ago to say that around here. Unfortunately, the party, like anything in life, won't last forever. Next week, about 8 to 12 days out from now, I do think the significant heat will come back.
Okay, let's stop right here. Let's hear what he just said. He reached out there about a week to 10 days in the forecast. He believes that he is correct because of the charts that has given him various models to look at, and they basically choose between the middle in determining what's going to happen. That's fine and dandy pertaining to the weather events that's coming out of the north, or the weather events that's coming from the south, or those that's coming out of the west. We hardly ever get dictated to by the weather, by the extreme weather that's happening in the east. Hardly ever. And the reason why is because the earth rotates from the east to the west, which makes the sun come up in the east and the sun go down in the west. So naturally, the flow of the earth and the jet stream is going to direct 3 various points that they have to be very, very concerned about. The point that I'm getting at that they have not been concerned about is the point of what's going on beneath our feet. How come for the past few years we have seen extreme weather, not just in the summertime, but even in the wintertime, of going from being maybe the coldest of the cold, like it was last year whenever a cold snap come down through here, and TVA had to apologize for it. But then again, sometimes it's liable to be 82, 85, 87 degrees at Christmas time, and we're liable to have a breakout of nothing but tornadoes, either at Christmas or right before Christmas, or shortly after. The weather patterns have become exceptionally unusual to the degree that we are seeing things today that is just totally off the charts. And so far this year, we have been very, very blessed. I'd rather see too much rain than I would not enough rain. But during the time that he was talking about, let's back it up a little bit so we can identify what he's talking about here. During the time, let's go a little faster. All right. During the time that he was talking about between May the 21st and June the 10th, was a time that the Mississippi River actually got down to the point that the barges was having difficulty, and the taxi that takes you from one side of the river to the other over by the New Madrid Fault area, from basically Hickman, Kentucky, over to the other side of Missouri, it actually didn't have to slow down, but stop for a day or two because the river had gotten so low. A radical weather changes. Fortunately, we didn't get bombarded like we did last year with the heat coming from the earth and no rain that caused the Mississippi River to not only go down, but caused it to stay down for, I guess, about 3, maybe 4 months before it finally retracted along about November. I am so thankful that between the month of June and the month of August, regardless of how much damage that it may have done towards having too much rain or flooding, I am so glad that we had that. And the reason why is because I automatically seen a picture of disaster of how that these farmers in this particular area, and I'm sure that they probably done the same thing in Kentucky and up in Illinois and probably over in Missouri and Arkansas too, and probably Alabama and Mississippi too, just went out hog wild and pig crazy, as the little farmer used to always say, towards going out here and getting all these irrigation systems. If everybody taps into the same water pool at the same time, you are definitely going to affect the water table below our feet, that's called aqueducts, that at any given time, because of the excessive pumping and the heat combined together, either from the earth or from the sun, could actually cause so many people's wells to go dry. I was so thankful because right up the road here going toward Sharon, Tennessee, they had just put in a brand new irrigation system, and why those people wanted to spend that kind of money on an open irrigation system, knowing that the eternal internal below the earth water system is so much more effective, and you don't waste near as much, and it does like twice the amount of job because you're not spraying the water out into the open air, that basically about a third of it or a little more either can evaporate or will evaporate depending upon how hot it is. And for them to be using those open irrigation primitive systems in broad daylight is another big no-no, because why can't you run the things at night? They basically run themselves. Once you activate the motor and you get the water pumping out the nozzles, it basically goes around and around in circle, or it'll go all the way like a 45 degree all the way to one side, and then it'll stop and it'll automatically come back. You don't have to get out there, you don't have to drive it, you don't have to steer it, you don't have to maintain it. It does it all on its own. These farmers are not, a lot of them, not all of them, but some of them aren't smart enough to figure out that, first of all, the irrigation system below the ground is a whole lot better, and number two, if you do have an antique irrigation system, you need to use it at night and not during the day. There's so many faculties that could have went into play this year towards making our lives absolutely miserable, just as miserable as basically our lives was last year, whenever they was basically charging the farmers $1 a bushel more because of the transport services that have been affected of the Mississippi River, of the barges having to shut down or slow almost completely down because of the river being so low. People don't understand how sensitive that this planet is running right now towards it either going to the far right or to the far left. And I'm so thankful that we did not get the massive droughts like we did last year, because if we did, I was afraid that there was going to be lots of wells that was either going to go dry or people was going to have to hire somebody to go in and dig the wells that much even deeper. It just goes to show you out of the greed and selfishness of how people just don't care. They really don't care about how that they're going to be affecting their neighbor down the road or their community or other people's lives. They basically just plug into the well and start pumping. And those pumps are big pumps. Some of them pumps are like 4-inch pumps, and I don't know how many thousands of gallons that they can pump in a minute per farmer. That we was staring at of a major calamity that could have very well hit this year if we didn't get those rains. So obviously somebody's prayers made it up into the heavens towards not having the disastrous droughts like we did last year that did affect the farming community and did affect the farming community pertaining to transporting grain up and down the Mississippi and well as everything else that gets transported. So the farmers this year got lucky. They got blessed in this particular area. I understand that some of these areas that got too much rain, it was damaging to them. But like I said, this tight walk balancing act, because of what the humans have been doing to the planet Earth and throwing all the carbon dioxide up into the atmosphere between the draining of the oil and between the carbon dioxide, it has made our weather so imbalanced. And the reason why that it's imbalanced is because A, what we have done to the planet, and B, what we have done to God, in God basically pulling his protected hand off of his people, because his people basically bit in the hand that was feeding them. And whenever I'm talking about God feeding us, I'm talking about having regular weather patterns. It's supposed to get cold in the winter. We're supposed to have snow and ice in the winter. We're supposed to have 4 seasons where we are right here. And it's not supposed to jump from winter to summer, or from summer to another climate that's basically imbalanced, or we're not supposed to have 82-degree temperatures in the middle of Christmas that we have seen now again and again and again. So because of the erraticalness that the forces of nature are showing us, these are all indications coming from the Bible that in the last days we would see great, humongous sorrows fall upon humanity. That's the reason why the Bible says, woe be unto humanity, or the inhabitants here upon to the earth, whenever you shall start to acknowledge of biblical Bible prophecies coming true. And that's going to have an effect on not only the Americans, but not only the Canadians, but it's also going to have an effect on everybody else all over the planet towards these erratical weather patterns. Now you may be saying, well, how come Jesus didn't warn us ahead of time? Jesus did warn us ahead of time. Jesus told us that there was going to be outlandish weather events. That's one of the reasons why that he said to flee into the mountains, because of the flooding areas, the low-lying areas. And it also talks about that there will be wars, rumors of wars, commotions, that there will be problems, brother turning against brother, father, son turning against father, daughter turning against mother. We're in that era right now. But obviously nobody wants to pursue the era of a revival or the era of peace. So we're basically stuck until we can see some sort of a movement coming from humanity, especially here in the Western world, in the continent of the United States. We're basically stuck. And I tend to wonder that even though they talk about peace, even though they talk about love, even though they talk about being the believers of the prophecy coming out of the Bible pertaining to the Lord Jesus Christ, they're only saying it in content. They really don't mean it. Now they'll tell you, oh no, we're believers, we're believers. Okay, if you're believers, how come you were so offended in the message coming from the founder of the Windmill Ministries? And how come to this day I still do not have a prominent support team that stands with me, the same as some of these other big churches or other big TV evangelists, such as, let's say, Oral Roberts or Joel Osteen or Billy Graham. I think there's still a pretty good support team that supports Jimmy Swaggart's ministry. It's not near as big today as what it was at one time before he got busted in the spring of 1988. That's whenever I was praying and down on my knees, trying to be submissive to God towards making or putting out my biography on video cassette tape. I think at the time the Assembly of God Church was taking on just about $1 million a day on average pertaining to the money flow until that occurred. Whenever that occurred, that well basically dried up. There was a little bit of money that was still coming to the Jimmy Swaggart's ministry, but he basically isolated himself away from the Assembly of God ministry and took up his own independency towards being his own ministry. And since then, he has built himself back up because of various TV evangelist ministries around the world, towards how that other people still see the sincerity coming from the Jimmy Swaggart ministry. But by and large, these people around here felt like that they had been bamboozled by that particular ministry, the same way as they felt that they had been bamboozled by PTL, or Oral Roberts had said that God was going to strike him down dead if he didn't raise a certain amount of money, which was not of God at all. Anybody that was going to say that, because God didn't strike him down dead, even though he didn't raise the type of money that he was looking to raise. And there's just been so many squandering scams here in America surrounding religious activities that has caused people to be very, very frightful of people such as myself. I'm not going to lie about it. They're frightful about people such as myself, even though I've been out in the limelight now for 30 some odd years. Have I been perfect? No. Can I raise the dead? No. Have I ever walked on water? No. I'm a sinner just like everybody else, saved by grace. Some of our sins are greater than others. Some of our sins is more noticeable than others. But if somebody tells you that they are a saint still walking around in the flesh, they're lying to you, because they have weaknesses, they have trials, they have moments that they have to deal with just like everybody else. Now, as you get older, you become stronger in the Lord, and hopefully you won't make either the same mistakes or make as many of the mistakes as you did whenever you was young in the Lord. But that goes with being seasoned. But for the community by and large, and the Western world over here in America, to basically turn up their nose and give me the cold shoulder the way that they did, towards basically hanging me out to dry, and that's exactly what they did. Now it's come back full circle towards backfiring on them. That's now bit them in the butt. And it's not only bit them in the butt morally, it's not only bit them in the butt spiritually, it's not only bit them in the butt politically, but in every other sense, including it has bit them in the butt pertaining to radical weather changes. It's all got to do of how that God is trying to use tough love strategies in trying to show humanity,
which makes that spell
show humanity who's really the one in charge. And if it wasn't for the leniency and the mercy of the Heavenly Father, we all would be doomed. Each and every one of us would be doomed. And I ain't just talking about doomed physically. I'm talking about doomed spiritually, doomed, our souls being doomed, if it wasn't for the love coming from God the Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. As we get further into this, I truly believe that until we see a great revival, until we see a mighty movement until God makes believers out of people pertaining to all these catastrophes and disasters that's going on, things are only going to dreadfully get worse. I truly believe that the hurricanes over there in the islands was part of the reasoning in behind why that they become so crispy dry, even though they were still getting rains, occasionally in the mornings and strong dews and stuff like that. Their vegetation had become very, very crispy, and that's what basically turned that whole scenario that recently just got through happening over in Hawaii, that I think they have added up about 2,300 structures that had been badly either damaged or destroyed. It had displaced about 4,000 people, and as of today, there's almost 100 people that they know of that have been deceased in the fire. And a lot of those people, the only way that they can determine that they've been in the fire, because the fire was so hot, is that they got to go in there with various diver dogs or scientific equipment to be able to determine whether or not they're actually looking at just ashes or whether or not they're looking at burnt remains. And usually the only way that they can tell whether they're looking at burnt remains is that they'll find teeth, or they'll find various bigger bone structures that haven't completely been burnt to a crisp. I hate to use that word, but basically been burnt to a crisp to the point that they're unrecognizable. I'm pretty sure that the death toll will continue to rise as they're still using trying to dig their way out of the problems that has recently occurred. But you keep in mind that there was another fire not too long ago out in California that basically done the exact same thing. I think the death rate in that fire was about 85. That was also called Paradise. And I continue to stand, and I will continue to stand. I will not change my opinion about this, that it is not God that is doing this. What is doing this is that we have changed the ecosystem in not only in the planet, but we have changed the ecosystem above our heads pertaining to the atmosphere and the stratosphere, etc. And because we have changed this, it has allowed for more and more erratic weather patterns, such as we're seeing today, go just as quickly into one extreme measure as it does another. Now, all this has occurred of being the driest to the wettest in 1 year. From May to August, I think is what, about 7 months there? Something like that? 6 months? And it's something that is very, very unusual, and that's the reason why that I felt like that it was due in showing it and identifying in just exactly how extreme that our weather has become. Now, if you live in a bigger city, New York, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Chicago, Atlanta, all these other big places, where you're submerged with nothing but concrete, asphalt, automobiles, buses, and people, you're not going to be able to recognize these extremes like we do out in the country. But because we're out in the country, we do recognize these extremes. As a matter of fact, as of this morning, I heard a beeping sound that was going on. It sounded like a heavy load operator, whenever it beep, 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 whenever they're backing up. And I looked outside, I never seen nobody, and I thought, well, that's kind of odd. I don't see no construction workers out here. But about an hour later or less, the county road commissioner come out here real quick and unloaded a backhoe with a finger on it, because a tree had fallen down and the bus couldn't get through the road. The tree was on the opposite side of my road. It wasn't on my property. But I thought to myself, wow, we've gotten so much rain just within the past, like, a month or so. And because we have gotten so much rain, it has basically made the ground very unstable. And a lot of these trees, because of it being so soggy, I'm going to use that word, soggy, it has made the trees more vulnerable to the degree that it don't take but just a little bit of wind now to blow one of the trees over. So this is going to contribute to those electrical disturbances depending upon how windy that we get from now till fall, of seeing excess amount of trees either falling on houses, power lines, cars, or even people, because the ground has become soggy. When you get 17 plus inches of rain between June the 10th and August the 14th, which is basically what, 2 months? You got a 2-month spread right there. Whenever you get that kind of rainfall and it becomes that soggy, yes, it's going to have its benefits, but it's also going to have its disbenefits, and part of the disbenefits is trees falling. Just like I was talking to the road commissioner, or one of the workers from the road commissioner, and he said last week that they was steadily busy because of all the flooding around in this area of various culverts that was being washed out and roads being washed out. It's very dangerous whenever you have this amount of water that just burst out of the I almost said universe, out of the upper atmosphere in the form of all these deluges, because it does cause massive amounts of flooding. It is good to some degree to the agriculture community, but in even that type of technique of rain falling, probably 80% of it, 75 to 80% of it actually goes into the wash, goes into the ditches and goes into the rivers and goes into the streams and eventually winds up at the Mississippi River. So it's really not effective or adequate rainfall whenever it has a deluge like that. I think Union City got something like 11 or 12 inches of rain. The week before that, up in Kentucky, they got flooded up there in Mayfield, Kentucky, where the tornado recently just hit. And there's been other areas that it's almost been difficult to keep up with so much of it because it's been so extreme. And that's just right here local. That ain't counting what's went on over in the Missouri side or the Arkansas side or down towards Alabama or Mississippi. Last year it was acting really, really strange and exceptionally different. I think Jackson, Mississippi, their city got flooded to the point that it contaminated all their water. We have seen Dallas and Houston get flooded again and again and again, pertaining to a sail that would just basically hold over it and just dump just 30, sometimes 30 plus inches of rain in the same area and be bombarded by all these deluges that just fall out of the sky. Once more, our weather patterns have become extreme. It's got to do with what we're doing to ourselves and what we're doing to the planet. And this is the way that Mother Nature has set itself up in trying to give out these signals in telling us, hey, you need to stop what you're doing, because if you don't, it's even going to become more erratical. And I continue to believe, regardless of what people may say, that we have tampered into something below our feet pertaining to all the oil that we've drained out of the earth. Because if you go all the way back to the late 1800s, early 1900s, basically whenever golf become its first franchise, and I think in 1909 or 1907 or something like that, if you go all the way back to where we are today, in how many trillions and trillions and quadrillions of barrels of oil that has been drained from the earth, you could fill up the Grand Canyon, not just to the Hoover Dam, but all the way to the top several times, plus then again. Whenever you continue to do this year after year, month after month, week after week, day after day, you will have a profound effect upon to the earth. There was a reason why that God says in Revelations that he will come back and destroy those who are destroying the earth, that if it wasn't in the realm of reality towards humanity being able to do this, it never would have been documented in the Bible towards God coming back and destroying those who are destroying the earth. It never would have been documented if it wasn't possible. So it is possible. And we are damaging the earth. And we're going to have to be more conscientious about what we're doing and how that we're doing it, because if we don't, it will be the doom to us all. And this is not some sort of a fear-mongering technique or tactic. This isn't somebody that's harping and bellowing and trying to make money off of other alternative energy sources pertaining to wind, solar, etc., etc., etc. This is somebody speaking from his heart that's telling you, in seeing these drastic, erratical weather events like we're seeing, are only going to get even worse, regardless whether it be out in California, of seeing the first paradise that got destroyed. I think it was in 2019 or 2018, whenever that happened, whenever all the forest fires was happening out west, versus now the second paradise out in Hawaii that has recently caused the death and injury to so many people. They claim that fire went from house to house, to village, to community for 5 continuous miles. And there was absolutely no warning whatsoever. The reason why that it wasn't no warning, I truly believe that it was being done on a supernatural entity, to the point that this evil demonic force that has done this again and again and again has the ability to basically shut down all first responding alarm systems that caused the death and injury of so many people because they was not warned. And I've also looked at Pearl Harbor. Whenever Pearl Harbor got hit, the military had different systems set up that failed. It was supposed to be foolproof. That failed. Why did they fail? How come the people in Pearl Harbor was not alerted towards knowing what was fixing to attack to them? I'm going to tell you why. Because some super force, evil force, had come in there and basically jammed their system down to the point that they did not or was not aware of what they was fixing to be hit by. And man, did they ever get hit. So you can't tell me that these forces of evil that it talks about in the Bible that will come down in great wrath in the last days, you can't tell me that they're not real. And that can be done on a individual level, that can be done on a community level, that can be done on a national level, that can be done on a global level. If you know anything at all about the supernatural, there's 2 different forces of supernatural. There's a supernatural of good and there's a supernatural of evil. Somebody that gets possessed of the devil and decides to go out here and rape and become a pedophile, or somebody that takes a AR machine gun basically and decides to go into a school or a church and kill a bunch of innocent people, that is not the entity of good that causes that human being to do that. That is the forces of evil that is impenetrated up into that person's heart and mind, to the point that that evil entity has taken over that human being, that is causing the death and destruction and the harm that they're doing to the rest of the Homo sapiens here up onto the planet. It's the same way if my house gets blown away or something radical happens to me that causes harm and hurt. I'm not going to look at that towards it being an act of God. I'm going to look at that towards it being an adversary, an enemy that has come in and destroyed my home or destroyed my community or destroyed whatever that's caused this type of harm and hurt. And that's the part that the Western world over here in America has not gotten or taken lightly of, pertaining to there's two different forces that we're dealing with. We are dealing with the forces of good, but we're also dealing with the forces of evil. And I hate to say it, my friends, but we are caught in the middle. We are considered the carnal damage, because this war that began thousands of years ago has still not come to a final head. Evil is still lurking. Evil is still here up onto the planet. And God has not yet come back for his children, for the church, and resurrected those that was worthy of being resurrected in the first resurrection, because it talks about those, blessed are those who take part in the first resurrection. That has not happened yet. So the forces of evil is even become more eviler. The forces of evil have become even more powerfuler. The temptations of evil has become even more enticing-er towards women and men basically flaunting themselves in front of one another, causing temptations to the degree that regardless of how strong you was, you're still going to have a tendency to look at that person and lust after them because they got the right body and they're young or whatever, and they're being influenced by this evil demonic spirit that's luring you into this. And that's exactly what it is. It's a luring effect that's basically trying to cause as many people to stumble and fail pertaining to God's people. And if you can't wake up to that and realize that, then obviously you either are unqualified to understand these things the way that I'm explaining them to you, or you just don't care. And the fact of the matter is, you're probably trying to pull the wool over everybody's eyes, those that are around you and those that knows anything about you. You're probably trying to cover up yourself and deceiving the people around you by thinking that you're such of a good-hearted, loyal, godly person, while the whole time you know that what you're doing is of a source of basically, as the Bible describes it, as being either those with a reprobate mind or those that are doing it intentionally to the degree that they are committing blasphemy. And blasphemy, my friends, is one of the most harsh sins in the Bible, of those that are pretending, those that are fakers, those that are manipulators out there that are trying to show themselves or display themselves as being good. And if you've taken any type of notice at all pertaining to the Saudis just within the past 3 years, man, have they ever taken a turn to the left versus to the right towards allowing for this to occur and that to occur. And now they're getting involved in this and getting involved in that. Now they're involved in not just the golf sports industry, but they're involved in other things. They're trying to cover up their wickedness, their evil, their so intent. And the way that they're doing it is through not only the command of the oil petroleum products, but also through the sporting communities. If you'll get to noticing what they're doing, they're trying to do a smear tactic in trying to make themselves look now all of a sudden acceptable in the eyes of the global international world. I just wanted to throw that in, that has been very, very noticeable, that I've taken notice to just within the past 3 years, especially with the golf deal and some of the other sporting events now that they're steadily trying to rub shoulders with, and as they're doing this, basically people are selling out to this evil force. People don't no longer have the right dignity about them, to the point that they'll take whatever's on the plate. And that's not supposed to be the true American Christian way. Not the way that I was raised anyway. Thanks again for listening. Good luck to each and every one of us as we end this program by saying God bless America, and God bless our endeavors towards where we go in the future. Shalom.